I heard what Chavez said, but don't think I was letting it sink in. Angels don't die. Angels don't exist, personally, but that's neither here nor there. If angels existed, I'd have seen a damn miracle or two around my house. My mother was a god nut, super religious, yet nothing saved her from that car accident or stopped my father's cancer. Now, there's some rational explanation. I know there is. This imprint on the floor, it could be human. Timothy said it was a massacre over 300 years ago, after all. So some guy died in a pool of his own blood, sword in hand, and the rest pooled in the shape of the wings. No, couldn't be wings. This was kinda like a Rorschach test. Someone sees puffy clouds, Chavez sees wings because there's two giant 30-foot statues of angels flanking the center of the damn room. It's in his head, that's all. I get a hold of myself. Chavez, Pete, get the scissor lift in here. Help out Bob and Mike, and let's get this job over with. Sooner we start, sooner we're done. Chop, chop. Pete gets motivated pretty quick, but Chavez is now on one knee, making the cross over his chest and saying God prayers. I ignore him for now and get busy myself with the task at hand. The most difficult problem first. The statue on the left needs to be cleaned, and carefully, since it's a work of art. As Bob and I are guiding the scissor lift into the place, I hear Timothy shout something at Chavez. I rush over, now feeling like I'm on a normal work site. Hey, don't shout at my guys. What's going on? I intervene. Chavez has both his hands up, stepping back from a huge structure of canvas and plywood, making up a barricade to the right side of the structure. I was just checking for stains, Fred. Understanding Chavez is a new thing for me, but it's not entirely unwelcome. Timothy seems exasperated. I appreciate your due diligence, but this area is unstable. I cannot have anyone pass these barricades. I apologize. I should have made that very clear. The main room is where the cleaning must be done. Only the main room. Any area that's barricaded is unsafe. I can't be held liable for the safety of your men if they wander past them. I looked at Chavez. You heard the man. Help Bob with the scissor lift. Then get that pre-treat on the statue. Be careful, okay? What saint is she? Chavez nodded, looking at Timothy. Timothy looked at the statue for a moment and gets kind of a faraway look. Dinah of Enoch. Chavez gives Timothy the thumbs up and says, I'll take good care of Saint Dinah. She will sparkle. He runs off to help Bob with the scissor lift, and a very confused Bob and Chavez make their way over to the statue of Dinah, I guess. Timothy is smiling an odd kind of smile, and it almost breaks my no questions rule for a moment. I get my hard hat on and start shouting at Bob when I see he's not wearing a harness on the lift. Typical worksite stuff. Gotta remind the old-timers they're mortal and make sure the greenhorns of the group don't screw around. I'm happy to slide back into my routine. It wouldn't last, of course. About halfway through the day, we're just about done getting the bust of the statue clear, and I gotta say, she's looking as good as new. That's when I hear a huge bang. It sounds almost like someone took an aluminum pipe and smashed it down on the marble. It echoes over our tools, and even the guys with ear protection are taken back by the sound. I scream and shout to cut the equipment and tell Bob and Chavez to get off the scissor lift. Lord knows if something blew on that damn thing. It's a rental, after all. I call Mike over to take a look. Mike slides under the lift as Bob and Chavez unhook their harnesses. Chavez looks to me. It wasn't the lift, boss. Then just what the hell was it? Chavez points to behind one of the barricades, and I spot Timothy running towards us. I think I hear him mumbling something like, this can't be happening right now. I shout to him, hey Tim, you need a hand? Timothy shoots me a stern look, and in a pretty practiced officer tone commands us, no one is to go beyond this point. Something may have collapsed. If there's an issue, I'll let you know. You just stay here, and disappears behind a piece of plywood canvas. I look to my guys and tell them to continue to inspect the scissor lift, and then get back to work if everything's okay. God only knows what compelled me to walk towards the barricade at that moment. Morbid curiosity, maybe. Lapse in sound judgment. Mini stroke? Still not sure to this day. But man, this had to be the third or fourth stupidest thing I did that day. I get just close enough to hear voices. There's a woman on the other side, and there's Timothy. "I'm sorry, I truly am, but I'm afraid they're all gone," I hear Timothy say, hushed but still enough for me to hear. "I know your pilgrimage must have been arduous." The female voice sounds frantic, almost heartbroken. "But that can't be. Surely this can't be. Who would do such a thing? Who could? Was it an army?" "It was 2 people, unfortunately," he said, almost guiltily. "They seemed to come in relative peace, but it was soon apparent that at least one of them had other ideas. All fought valiantly, but they couldn't be stopped." The woman's voice was trembling. "It was her, wasn't it? The daughter of Luke." The pressure washer kicked in and startled me while drowning them both out, and I realized how close I was to the barricade trying to listen. I stepped back and made my way quickly to the rest of the group, keeping an eye on the far barricade. Timothy had vanished behind it, and I didn't see him emerge till we were about done for the day. Timothy stops as he sees it, in reverence of some kind, I guess, looking it over silently. I walked over to him. "So far, so good. We should be able to get some pre-treatment on the floor, let it sit overnight, and we'll hit it hard tomorrow." "Your men do swift work," Timothy said with a nod. "That's what we do," I said proudly. Pete started yelling for me from across the room, and I excused myself to hustle over. "What's up?" I asked, looking over at where Pete was. He just points down. There, for a lack of a better word, is a gash in the flooring. I need to explain why this floor is unusual. More so than just having blood all over it, and more than the shape of said blood. You see, the floor doesn't have seams. It's a solid chunk of marble. Now, I've seen some expensive walls and floors that are just huge slabs, sure. Happens all the time. If you have enough money, they'll tow a mountain to your house. But this was a mansion worth of floor. And for the life of me, I couldn't find a damn seam in it. Now, the gash, it's almost 10 feet long, and at the center, it looks almost 6 inches deep. Even with the light, while I can see the bottom, it looks pretty dark inside the gash. Pete looks at me. I'm going to ignore how this got here and just ask what we're supposed to do. The surface scratches are easy to buff out, but this isn't going to buff out so easy, boss. I call Mike over to have a look. Mike looks it over and runs his hands over the edges of the opening, as well as on the sides. It's all stained, of course. Jesus. He stands up and looks over at us. That's one clean swipe. There's no cutting marks, like you'd get if you were slicing into it with a floor cutter. So, he thinks it over. Can I toss in some quickset to fill it? Get it most of the way full anyway, and we can just toss in some filler and polish it. I think we can do better with some resin, make it look a bit more natural. It's up to the client though, but this is going to cost extra. I look it over. A 2-inch, 10-foot, 6-inch deep slash in the marble certainly wasn't in the order. I look to see Timothy is already approaching us. "Just the man I needed to see," I said. Timothy looks down and shakes his head. "She did some serious damage." "Don't ask. Just don't," I keep saying in my head. "We can fill it and get it level, may even make it look pretty, but this wasn't in the original quote, so I'd say about another $4 grand. I'd feel bad if this entire job didn't feel like some crazy funhouse." Timothy, though, just nods. Fine, don't go crazy. Just see it's level, that no one trips over it." Mike heads out to get the materials we need, and I drag one of the sandblasters over. The gash is smooth, and it'll need to be rougher if that quickset is going to fill it in right. Everyone gets to work while I start to blast on this thing. Then something black shoots straight out of the gash and clatters somewhere behind me. This is a prime example of why you always wear a hard hat, folks. I cut the blaster and look around. It doesn't seem like anyone else heard anything. I looked at what popped out of the gash and realized the gash is about 9 inches deeper, and I can see it's still solid marble. No subfloor of dirt. Nothing is behind me but my closed toolbox. Whatever popped out must have shattered when it hit the ground, or all I saw was sand and blood popping out of the gash on the floor. I get my ear protection back on and finish up prepping the gash to be filled. We pack up for the day after that. The floor is pre-treated. We store the tools and such inside and do a quick head count. I notice I'm short one Honduran. Oh yeah, mystery solved on that one. Chavez is from Honduras. I look around and then spot him coming out from behind the barrier. Timothy walking behind him, his hand on his shoulder. Shit. I run over. Chavez, what the hell are you doing? He told you not to. Sorry, boss. It won't happen again. He was very quiet and looked at Timothy. Please consider. I do not mind. It's dangerous, George, Timothy said. Discuss it with me later, okay? Chavez just nods and walks off. What was that about, I ask. Timothy just walks past me. I thought you didn't ask questions. Not when it involves one of my guys, who, I'm sorry, disobeyed your instructions, I said, clearing my throat. Timothy glanced back at me, and with the light from the door behind him, I kinda got the best look at his ice blue eyes. Ensure it doesn't happen again, Fred. I just nodded dumbly as the red flags kept waving in my head. Just don't show up tomorrow. Take the money, leave the gear, go on your merry way. Granted, I had only been paid for half the job, but still, it was a decent amount. We got packed up and the crew and I headed out, packing my toolbox and other small items in the truck. I noticed Timothy was locking up the doors of the place and then escorting us to the gate. He closed them with him on the other side. I pulled my truck up to the gate. You living on site? Yes, I have a trailer out back, Timothy said hesitantly. See you bright and early tomorrow then. Timothy just nods and waves us off. I never actually paid attention to where he went from there. I turned to Chavez in the truck and asked, So, what did you and Timothy talk about? "'Kay?" is all Chavez said. He was messing with me, but I put it out of my mind. Dropped Chavez off at his place, and he waved at me as always. Gracias, Senor Fred, and heads home. I head back to my house as well, thoroughly confused. At home, the kids are asleep, as is the wife, and I got my toolbox in the garage. I pop open my box as I've got a couple of things to swap out for the next day, specifically some mixing bits and the like. When I open my toolbox, however, something inside is certainly not a tool I've ever used. I suddenly recognize it. It's the object that came out of the gash. My toolbox was open behind me, and it must have closed as the thing slammed into it. The object is about 3 wide deep in the center, 2 feet long, and about 3 inches thick at the top, tapering to a point at the bottom. It looks like a wedge, and I realize it's probably blood that seeped out of the gash and solidified over the years. I pick it up, and it's light. Despite my attempts, though, I can't break the thing. Looking at this object in the light for the first time, it almost looks like a blade. Either that or the shape of the gash just shaped it into that thing. The top is flat, the bottom comes to a point. Not sharp, but it could be. Light seems to penetrate through the edge of this thing, and it's tinted a deep red. The rest appears to be black. I didn't even know blood could become solid, but I guess if there's enough of it, anything's possible. It's about 10 after 11 when I swear I hear 3 taps against the front door, as if I had a knocker or something. I don't, but anyway. I leave the object in my toolbox, closing it up and locking it, and head for the front door. I'm not an idiot. I make sure to check my closet next to the door, and make sure my shotgun's loaded. It's after 11 p.m. What psycho comes knocking at someone's door this time of night? I open the door halfway, and I'm greeted by an outstretched hand with a black ring on each finger, one of which was about to tap against my door. The hand pulls back and clasps a wide-brimmed white hat, removing it from its head and lowering it to about chest level. One hand is behind him, and he's standing a good 6'3", wearing a white duster and some sort of red tie over a black, very expensive-looking dress shirt. He has white-rimmed glasses and yellowish eyes behind them, jet black hair that's well kept. As he speaks, it's almost like his voice doesn't match his body. His face isn't odd, but he doesn't stand out, and his voice sounds like it comes from an old cop movie. Evening, young man. I understand you're working with an associate of mine. Goes by Timothy. While client confidentiality isn't my cornerstone, keeping my business out of my personal life sure as hell is. Sorry, buddy. I'm gonna have to ask you to talk about business during business hours. His face falls slightly. Now, this is important. Regarding that place you were working at, Timothy may have misled you, you see. He's using that place for his own means, not prosperity. He pulls out some kind of business card and twirls it over each finger before handing it to me. I look it over. It's just a phone number on it, no other information. His other hand brings out an unlit cigarette, which he brings to his mouth and inhales, smoke venting out of his nostrils. If you were to happen across something of note, I'd appreciate it if you could contact me. Yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not the kind to take things off the worksite. Normally, this is completely true. His oddly perfect teeth glisten off the front porch light as he spreads them into a shit-eating grin. True, be ashamed to take something you don't understand, only to wind up dead. He cocks an eyebrow at me, or worse. By this point, I'd had it with the creep on my porch. Listen, pal, hit the bricks, you hear me? Get the hell off my property or I'll call the cops. I try cocking my own grin, but I don't think it worked as well as his does. Or worse. He stands still. I can barely tell if he's breathing. I pump the shotgun behind the door. I know there's no point to it. I just eject a perfectly good shell. But I want him to hear that I had a gun, in a pump action, and it's in my hand. His voice suddenly changes, or he just drops the facade, and a raspy voice like that of a lifelong chain smoker slithers out of his throat, half a whisper, half a wheeze. Not parting with it then, eh? Well, I'll have it one way or another for certain. The accent is hard to place. It's not quite Middle Eastern, but it's not like anything I've ever heard. I now pulled a shotgun out and pointed at his face. And now I'm done with you. Whoever you are, get out. He doesn't even flinch. He just grins, a hissing chuckle dropping out of his mouth. You're a fun one. Never once does your sort disappoint. Always resorting to fire provided by Prometheus. He paused, eyeing the barrels of the gun, never considering where it came from. I'm not sure where he pulled it from, but he suddenly crunches into an apple he must have had in his pocket. I suppose I'll have to reconsider. Maybe when you're asleep. Like what happened to that hooker you cleaned up a few years back in Broadway. My heart skipped a beat. I don't talk about clients, and clients would never talk about me, and I never go into that much detail either. I just restore stuff. A man of your skills is bound to clean up a homicide or two, knowingly or not. He tilts his head back, looking at me down the barrel of my gun, cleaning up the sin left behind by those less scrupulous than yourself. Oh, we've been watching you for some time. Now, for some reason, his eyes go wider. Red Fred. I click the safety off the shotgun and put my finger on the trigger. Get the hell out of here, right now. Another loud crunch of his apple. He seems to be mocking me as he throws his hands up, walking backwards, keeping eye contact with those yellow eyes. Very well. Another time, then. You are a fun one, Red. He turns and starts to walk off. I haven't moved the gun yet, still training it on him. Don't call me Red, you... I realized I haven't gotten the creep's name. The card he gave me just had a phone number. Whatever your God-given name is. My mother always said that when she was mad. She shouted it out onto the phone all the time when telemarketers would give her a fake name. What's your God-given name? So it's a force of habit I picked up. I only said it when I'm really pissed off at somebody. And this guy had me pretty livid. Bar none, the dumbest thing I apparently did all day. He stops, dead on the walkway, his hand slowly going down to his side. Oh, you compel my God-given name. His head starts to turn towards his right shoulder, but his shoulders aren't moving, not an inch. As I watch, I get ready to shoot. I swear if his head does a full 180-degree turn, I don't care what his name is. I'll start shooting until he stops moving, and probably pump a few more rounds into him just to be sure. His head stops just shy of a complete turn, and I can see both yellow eyes as he slowly places his hat back on his head. He grins, and I swear I watch his pupils dilate till his eyes look almost entirely black with yellowish rings around them. You can tell Timothy my name too. It's Belial. He lets out another hissing laugh, and I swear I can hear the gun shaking in my hand for some reason. I don't know why, but I feel the blood drain out of my face for a moment, and the whole area got a bit dimmer, as if something was draining the light. I stagger slightly, but regain my footing, pressing the shotgun butt against my shoulder tightly, as if it was somehow gonna help me. He turned away from me, and as he walked off, he wheezed out, "Don't forget to tell Timothy I stopped by, and what I stopped by for." I pulled the gun back, shut the door, locked it, and shut the blinds. My heart was hammering in my chest as I checked the shells in my gun to ensure that it had been loaded. I clicked the safety back on, and I rushed upstairs to my bedroom. My wife was fast asleep as I sat on the edge of the bed, gun in hand, staring at my front door down the hall. I swear, I can hear something tapping against the window at random times all night. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thanks so much for joining me for tonight's story. Well, this is part 2 of our restoration series, and I'd say it's off to a pretty good start. If you enjoy the author's work, don't forget to follow the links below. I've put up links to his subreddit as well as his profile, where you can find all kinds of cool stuff. Look for Zithero for the next couple of weeks, because I think we're going to be reading all 5 parts of his restoration series. Before we go, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle and Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Zeronin for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributor. And thanks to Glenn Jenkins for being our Ghost Rider tier contributor. Thanks, guys. We just couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to join the show, come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, you can have your name read out at the end of every TikTok and every YouTube video I do. Patrons also get their stories a day early, so come get your Wednesday story on Tuesday and your Friday story on Thursday. They also get to read the stories a day early, so if that's something you're into, come on down. Don't forget, I've got a book coming out at the beginning of July, so if you go ahead and join Zeronin as one of my Ghostly Reader tier contributors, you get a signed copy of my book in your mailbox anytime I write one. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.